بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله أما بعد. So I welcome all of you, dear students on the Tajdeed Club program. Inshallah, today will be an introductory seminar where we will be introducing the acts of reading as a science, inshallah. You have been reading, you have begun your journey into the set book that we have for this trial period, named The Well-Educated Mind by Susan Wise Boer. And I hope you guys have been having fun, and I have been reading your discussions, and I'm very pleased, mashallah, that you guys are engaging as we planned it to be, alhamdulillah. So it's a great achievement that we have already seen from our student side, alhamdulillah. So today's seminar will be an introduction, right, to our way of education in this program, right? So I want to talk about a couple things, inshallah, before we jump into the actual discussion of the first chapter, which we'll be analyzing as a sample analysis, inshallah, just so that you can model your future readings based on that, inshallah, okay? So as we said, that Tajdeed Club, it primarily relies on classical books, or at least a great literature that has left a mark on humanity. Literature, research, work that has been authored over the millennia that humans have existed, right? Or the hundreds and thousands of years that humans have existed, rather. Only a few books have sort of stood the test of time, and those few books really deserve our attention, right? Not every book deserves that time, and we don't want to be wasting our time. And as Muslims, our primary goal, as we educate ourselves in the Islamic sciences, as we educate ourselves to become Islamic scholars, bi'idhnillah ta'ala, we have to educate ourselves in the sciences of the day, right? And to be educated truly, you have to be comprehensively educated, i.e., you must be able to apply the education that you receive on the Islamic front onto the world that you live in. Okay. Normally, this is referred to as the fiqh al-waqi'. Okay, fiqh al-waqi', the deep understanding of what the reality is, so that you can truly place the fatwa in that context, so that you're understanding your rulings, your understandings of the particular fiqhi issues is not it's not misplaced. It's not misplaced. It's supposed to be congruent to the current time, so that your application is sound, and so that no one in the society that you are leading as a Muslim da'i or a scholar, no one is harmed by your ignorance or misjudgment. Okay, so these two components are very, very important, and they go hand in hand. So Tajdeed Club is an auxiliary to our Islamic program, which is the mentorship program. And its mentorship is supposed to be a very specialized training for Islamic scholars, inshallah. And we have certain students who are studying with us on that. Most of our students who are here with us today, inshallah, they are actually students with us on the mentorship program as well. So the point is that this is supposed to be a complementary education in the comprehensive sciences, and the textual arts, the nusus, inshallah, is to complement the fiqhi and the lughawi and the ijtihadi training, right? The training that you will receive as a faqih and a mufassir, inshallah, when you do the mentorship program. So the Tajdeed Club, essentially, because it relies on reading books, and the great books at that, we have to make sure that we provide our students with a few things. One of them has to be a very clear, guided sense of how to read. Okay, very clear sense of how to read, how to actually dive into the book, so that you're actually not wasting time and you are acquiring as much as you possibly can with your given or at least current abilities with reading, inshallah. And the whole point of this program is to develop your skills as a learner and as a reader. So that's the first thing. We give you guided questions and summaries and whatnot, literature, to sort of help you through that journey. Okay. Secondly, just reading alone and reading effectively is not the only solution. As mashallah, one of the or some of the students they highlighted in the discussion channel, they were saying how, subhanallah, you can educate yourself, you can read all you want, but it might be the case that you come to wrong conclusions. You might come towards conclusions which are not exactly supported by the religion of Allah Azza wa Jal, right? So what do you do? So this is, as I said, as I pointed to them in the discussion, is that this is essentially the crux of the debate between the Islamic mode of education. How does Islam envisage education to happen, and how does the Western aspect of or Western element um, projects it, right? So that would be the classical liberal arts model of education. Okay, it's normally referred to as a classical education, and this is the model of education that you are essentially reading about when you're reading this book. Okay, so inshallah we'll talk about that in a bit. So the students inshallah will be given guided questionnaires and questions to answer. So just so that their reading is effective, they save time and they read in the most conducive manner. Secondly, we provide them, with, as I said, Islamic guidance, inshallah. And thirdly, because just reading alone wouldn't be enough, for it to be consolidated and become part of your long-term memory and become part of your deeper understanding, you need to have discussions. You need to come forth and discuss what you've read. You need to test the waters, right? And stand scrutiny, right? So you can say something and other people might agree or disagree with you, right? And then, of course, there'll be people such as your seminar leaders, or at least myself, inshallah, where any future leaders will come after me as we progress with the program, inshallah. They will be able to guide you better. And at least, inshallah, you may come with certain assumptions or certain arguments, or at least a certain type of understanding of the text, which would be perhaps okay as a beginner, inshallah, but it might need a bit of a nudge towards the right direction, right? And that's the point of the seminars. Now, there's a lot of reading programs that have existed. And mostly these reading programs exist, at least of the great books, they exist in the top universities. This model that we are employing in the Tajdeed Club, this is normally used by higher tier universities like Harvard and Columbia, the classical liberal arts universities, and to some extent Oxford and Cambridge and whatnot, right? So the model, the way it differs from them now is that we're not just allowing you to explore the ideas. We're not just saying that go and let yourself free into the world of ideas and thought, right? We're not just saying that your shackles are removed, so think as you may please, because that would be a disservice if we are to be true to our religion, right? Islam, where it does draw a line when we speak of education, that when you educate yourself and you talk about education, it has to be in line with the principles of the Quran and the Sunnah, inshallah. Okay, so that's the structure. So what we are providing, which is extra, which is rather completion to an education experience that these universities give, is that we give you an Islamic perspective on all things, and inshallah you'll see some of that in practice today, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Okay, right. So the first thing I want to mention today, inshallah, is because, as I said, we have seminars, right? These are the second component from the three-part program that we mentioned. We have the guided reading advice and guidelines and everything. Then we have the Islamic perspective on things through our guides and some summaries. And then we'll have these seminars, right? So we'll have seminars, which will be primarily student-led, and then we'll have monthly seminars. So these are weekly seminars, okay? And then we'll have our seminars, which will be led by seminar leaders other than myself, inshallah, right? So if I can everyone see the screen, inshallah? Hope everyone can see the screen, inshallah. طيب. Right. So the way these weekly seminars are going to work is that on a weekly basis, as your curriculum has been set, you will go through that set curriculum, the set targets for the week. You will read to the best of your abilities, following the guidelines that we've given you, in terms of doing the elementary and inspectional level of reading, and then doing as much of the analytical reading as possible, and if possible, also jumping a bit into the syntopical aspect of things, where you come across a theme, a topic, and you're interested in it, and then you go out of it, out of that book or that literature, and you explore that in other literature, like we saw, mashallah, with some of the sisters. They said, oh, you know what, I found this point interesting, and oh, what, subhanallah, there's a hadith that talks about this particular topic, right? So she went on, right? So she went on to, uh, you know, uh, quote that hadith, subhanallah, right? So when she's doing that, without realizing, perhaps, I assume, she was doing syntopical reading. She was reading a piece of literature that we have set for her, and some other students, mashallah, did the same, right? Some other students did the same thing. They quoted a hadith and some other perspectives that they were, right? So this is what you do during the week. And then, inshallah, once a week, you are going to have student-led seminars, okay? Student-led seminars, as we've mentioned. And then have at the end of the month, you have a monthly seminar led by myself, inshallah, okay? So how do these weekly seminars work? The weekly seminars, as I mentioned, are conducted by the students themselves. So the students that we have enrolled, inshallah, will have two options for the students. Either they volunteer as seminar leaders, inshallah, for each week, or we will, place them in an order of a hierarchy, as into, okay, this is the first, week one would be guided by this particular person, and week two would be guided by the second person, and week three would be guided by the fourth person, right? How the seminar leader conducts themselves in that, right? That is the discussion of this first part of today's presentation, okay? Inshallah, I'll show you how a seminar leader, inshallah, in these weekly seminars is supposed to act and conduct the seminars, inshallah, okay? So we'll talk about that briefly, and then I'll mention the kind of questions that you should be answering before each seminar, inshallah, in the next part of this presentation, inshallah. Before we jump into the actual act of reading, how you guys should be actively reading the texts before these seminars, inshallah, and how you should be answering these questions. So this document that I have also shared, we have shared this in the main channel, which is the main Tajdeed channel, Tajdeed Club channel, where we are posting all the content, the main content, and setting targets and giving you guidance and everything, which is separate from the discussion channel. These documents have been shared over there. Okay, so I want everyone to pay attention to this, inshallah, all the students who are signed up for the Tajdeed Club, because inshallah, at some point you will serve as seminar leaders. When you place yourself in a leadership position and in a teaching position, your brain works completely differently, and it forces you to better yourself and output something from within yourself that possibly was unwitnessed by yourself even. Okay, so it's something that is highly recommended for students to serve as seminar leaders. This is why in universities, I'm sure those of you who have gone there would have seen that in universities you have students who are perhaps senior bachelor level students, or they are master's level students, or sometimes a PhD students. They serve as seminar leaders, right? And in my experience, served as seminar leader in the first year as well, right? So it just depends on the maturity of the seminar leader. And inshallah, all the students, inshallah, when they have their turns as seminar leaders, they'll develop that maturity. So it's very, very important. So one of the defining features of our program, that we want to give leadership to our students so that they, inshallah, think on their feet when it comes to it, and of course with preparation. So the seminar leaders, inshallah, they are expected the following. Okay, of course, before the seminars, you have access to us as much as you want. You can ask as many questions, as many pieces of advice before you conduct the seminar yourself. So the first thing and the last thing, you start, right, the seminar, and you are supposed to be welcoming. right? You're supposed to welcome everyone. And so, of course, this is going to be gender specific. So it's going to be females only seminar for the females and men or male only seminar for the brothers. So inshallah, you can turn on your cameras, you can speak to yourself, inshallah, you don't have to type. So it can be a bit more direct. So the seminar leader is supposed to make everyone feel welcome, okay? Feel everyone, positive and inclusive. طيب? Now, towards the end of the seminar, they're supposed to express their gratitude, right? They're supposed to conclude the seminar by again, with the same positivity that they started the whole thing with, right? So the beginning of an action and the ending of an action is supposed to be, the key, takeaways that students take. They will take away the positivity if everything starts on a positive note and it ends on a positive note and it ends with gratitude and it begins with gratitude as well. Okay, so the seminar leaders, inshallah, they're supposed to express how grateful they are for everyone's presence. طيب. And they're supposed to welcome everyone, inshallah, and encourage everyone at every single stage. طيب. Now, secondly, they're supposed to facilitate active participation. They're supposed to encourage everyone to show themselves in the camera if they feel comfortable with that, but at least to keep the mic on so they can speak to each other properly. They don't wait, there's no lag, in written communication, okay? Because it's only sisters talking to sisters, there shouldn't be any, inshallah, discomfort whatsoever with regards to that, okay, inshallah. Now, with regards to active participation, they're also supposed to promote a respectful dialogue, right? So that no one is, foul in their speech. Of course, we don't expect anyone to, inshallah. But this is something that a seminar leader is supposed to make sure that, the environment, the discussion, the seminar remains respectful. And of course, with men, it is actually very plausible that sometimes, they get quite quite emotional with their arguments, and they want to defend themselves, and sometimes it gets heated, and we've seen chapters of that. But sisters, inshallah, we hope better from them, inshallah, because sisters are generally more well-mannered. Hopefully I'm accurate with my description. So the seminar leaders are supposed to be they're supposed to promote respectful dialogue, and they are supposed to encourage critical thinking from the students. They're supposed to, encourage reflection and action from the student. I'll mention each of these in a bit in a second, inshallah. And they're supposed to facilitate active listening. Okay, they're supposed to facilitate active listening from the students so that everyone listens to each other properly, and then they take turns to participate actively, right? And everyone participates respectfully, right? And everyone engages in a critical dialogue. Okay, inshallah. So, active participation, right? Encourage all the participants to share their thoughts and perspectives. And then one of the key elements of this active participation would be to use open-ended questions. And open-ended questions are important, and I mentioned why. For all seminar leaders, open-ended questions for any seminar, and in fact, open-ended questions are important for a general healthy conversation anyway. I hope everyone understands what open-ended questions are. In fact, before I explain myself, can anyone tell me what an open-ended question means? Quickly, inshallah. Just so that we know that everyone is engaged, inshallah. Do we know what an open-ended question is? Aha, excellent, mashallah. One of the sisters, she says, questions that don't have yes or no answer. In other words, questions that don't have an exact answer, right? If I say to you, which city is the capital of England? That question is not an open-ended question because there's no other answer but one answer, which is London, right? And so on and so forth. So any question which only has one answer, one specific answer, even if it's not just yes or no, but it could be specific. If I say to you, which laptop am I using to conduct a seminar? And you say, a Windows laptop, and someone says, well, you're using a MacBook, right? You with me, inshallah? So, this question, again, would not be an open-ended question. It would be a direct question, an exact question. You have to guess the right answer, right? But the seminar leaders are supposed to ask as many open-ended questions, because the point of all this reading is not to, most of the time, other than the specific Islamic perspectives, on certain issues, right? Most of the time, inshallah, in your readings, you'll find that there's no exact one answer. Okay, a variety of perspectives, a variety of answers is very much possible. Okay, so the job of a seminar leader is supposed to, ask as many open-ended questions, right? Questions which would allow the students to engage with their diverse perspectives, diverse answers. It doesn't have to be exact, and it doesn't have to be correct either. The whole point of this discussion is so that people speak their mind, right? And our job is to correct those minds if they have spoken something which is perhaps not in line with Islamic values, or at least it's something that is going in a completely wrong direction, and we want to nudge them back into the right direction, so they get to at least towards a conclusion which is closer to something that the author expects you to get to. Okay, so open-ended questions. And then, of course, and this is clear, promote respectful dialogue, make everyone feel comfortable, no one gets hyper, no one gets angry, laughter is fine, you can laugh, and you can enjoy yourselves, inshallah. That is actually good, right? And it's also good to be sometimes forceful when you express yourself, right? But do that within the boundaries of respect and mutual care for each other. Okay. And then, as I said, you should actively listen, right, to each other. Never interrupt the other person, because listening, as I said, and as you must have read by now in the book as well, listening or taking in information before you form judgments, right? Unlike what you do with news, right? You're eating a toast, as she says in the book, and you're just taking information and you're forming opinions about some person who blows himself up, a terrorist attack or a suicide attack, and you just take in what the media tells you, and she says that of course that is not how it should be. There's so many things that you should be thinking about when you're listening, right? So active listening is like active reading, actively being present, inshallah, and honestly engaging with everyone else's mind, right, shows that you are honest to yourself when it comes to learning. Okay, you are honest to yourself that you're here to learn. You're here to learn from others, because no one is complete, no one is whole. People and afraad, men and women, they get together to make a jama'ah, right? And jama'ah is a whole. That is something that Allah speaks of. He says, Yadullah, in the hadith, the Prophet said, Yadullahi ala jama'ah, Yadullahi ala jama'ah. The hand of Allah is upon the jama'ah. Okay, so you actively listen, and there's definitely going to be elements where you don't agree with someone else, and you have that's a good thing, right? But you can only form judgments about someone else once you've given a fair, a fair try, or at least a fair attempt at listening to what they have to say. Okay, so inshallah, that is as far as your interaction with your peers is concerned as a seminar leader. Right now, you as a seminar leader, you also have to manage your time effectively. Say you're discussing chapter 2, right? And there's about 5 key arguments in it, and each of those arguments essentially fall back to one premise. So your job as a seminar leader would be to use the general question bank that we have provided, and then you divide your time accordingly. Say you give yourself, inshallah, at least 2 hours of discussion each week as a group, inshallah. And this is a seminar where everyone has to be present. Say you give yourselves 2 hours of discussion each week. Those 2 hours must be timed, right? You should manage your time before you begin. Okay, inshallah. So you should manage your time before you begin. And encourage critical thinking by making sure you ask lots of why questions, how questions, if questions, then questions, right, inshallah. So be critical. Wherever you can, if you can't think of a question, think of a question, right? If you can't find anything wrong with anyone's statement, try and, find something wrong with it. So just to expand your mind when it comes to being critical, okay, inshallah. As you're doing this, as you're engaging in all of this discussion with your colleagues, summarize and synthesize at each stage, make sure, okay, so far we've done this, and so far we've learned this, right? So the next point is this. Okay, right. So how does this connect to the previous point that we were discussing? So summarize and synthesize at each given stage during your discussion. And as you do that, try and provide guidance and clarification to the best of your ability, that you have done that you have acquired through your personal reading, and you have asked as questions, inshallah, to us, and we have clarified it to you before your seminar, inshallah. Okay, and that's pretty much it. And last but not least, this is the last point here: encourage reflection and action. The whole point of learning is to put it into action, right? So encourage participants to reflect on how the discussion has impacted their thinking. Each session has to conclude with these two things, right? And you could perhaps incorporate all of these things in roughly the same order, but these two things must happen at the end, right? The last few minutes, 5 to 10 minutes of the session, must be about a collective reflection on how the discussion has impacted the thinking of the students in the group, right? And they should be able to identify some actionable takeaways for further exploration. For example, you must have read how, back in the day, people used to have commonplace books, and they used to have diaries and journals to record their readings, right? One of an actionable takeaway would be, right, what kind of journal are you guys buying? And one of the sister might say, well, I'm going to be buying the pinkish, purplish butterfly one, and the other person says, no, I feel a bit more, classic, so I'm just going to buy a black moleskin journal. And the other person says, well, I'm just going to buy some parchment. I'm feeling, a bit savvy with my journal selection. Doesn't matter, right? Just have action steps, inshallah, towards the end after you've reflected on the discussion of the seminar. Now, a very important question was raised by one of the sisters in the seminar, and she said that, how do we know what we're thinking is right? Okay, how do we know what we are thinking is right? Right. And even when you have to having discussion with students like yourself, how would you know that your discussion is going in the right direction? The way to answer that is, the first step of education, the first stage of education, as you've learned, is not analysis. It's not critical thinking. It's not syntopical analysis of the book or the topic, right? The first stage of your learning is, of course, the grammar stage, which is your elementary and your inspectional stage of learning, where you're just learning for the sake of understanding the author as perfectly as possible, so you can regurgitate their mind as accurately as possible. So you can be honest with yourself that if you've understood what the author is saying, and inshallah, you can do that to the best of your ability as time passes. Maybe initially some of you would be good at it, but others might not be as perfect with it, right? Inshallah. So the seminar would allow you to feed in from other students who are better than you, and then you'll be able to help others who are not as good as perhaps you are. Okay, inshallah. So that's the first thing. You're still engaged in the elementary inspectional level of reading as learners, inshallah, and you're trying to understand the author as perfectly as possible. And that is something you can get better at as you read more and as you train yourself more, inshallah. So that's something that you shouldn't be worried about. Now the point comes, you've thought hard, deeply enough, and the other student has thought about the problem deeply enough, but both of you understand things, say, slightly differently, or you both understand the same thing, but both of the understandings are wrong. Perhaps, let's say. That would happen, and that could happen, but that would happen very less. It wouldn't happen very often. Okay, and that is something that we've known in the history of education, right? Very few ideas can take you very, very far from the destination, inshallah. Okay, as far as things which are directly connected with Islam and our lives as Muslims, inshallah, you'll receive that as a guidance, inshallah, in the reading guides. So what we're doing is we're preparing reading guides for each book. So each book that you read, inshallah, there's going to be a guide for it. And so the main thesis, the main arguments, anything that she's mentioned that she's assuming from her Western heritage, inshallah, we'll be exposing that and we'll be clarifying that. So inshallah, so anything that could possibly damage you, you guys go in the wrong direction, for example, anything they can possibly think that, what if I go wrong in this? And If it's something that is simply a perspective, which is to do with a general point, then there's no harm in it, inshallah. And you can, and we can actually appreciate a difference of opinion in things, inshallah. But when it would come, to a contention with Islamic values, inshallah, you will definitely receive guidance on it. And the whole point of that is so that we remain in line with our religion and we are applying everything that we're learning, inshallah, onto our religion. And one of the main points that we are hoping for towards the end of this, inshallah, reading through this first book after, by the end of 3 months, is that you have a good idea, or at least a clear idea, of how Islamic education contrasts with a Western liberal form of education. As you learn how to read better, and as you learn how to dissect books and wrestle with the books and learn better, and so on and so forth, inshallah, you'll also be learning more about how Islam projects learning, inshallah. Okay. طيب. I'll take you guys to the next slide, which is sample guided questions. Hopefully, inshallah, that initial guide set of guidance was clear, inshallah, for all the students. And if there's any questions, inshallah, we'll take them towards the end of the presentation. So these are sample guided questions for seminar leaders. Now, all these questions are meant for, of course, as simple as simply as guidance. They're not supposed to be followed down to the last full stop. Okay, they're only meant as a sample guidance, inshallah. But these are roughly the categories that each seminar should be targeting. Okay, so I'm just giving you a little cursory view of this, and I'll go to the top, inshallah. Right. So your initial seminars, and each seminar that you guys do, will always begin with the introduction to the book. The reason why that is the case is because by each chapter, or with every chapter that you read and you progress onto the book, it might change your initial impressions of the book. It might change your initial understanding of the motivation of the author, and certain things that you initially assumed about the book, inshallah. So it's a way of checking yourself as you read, inshallah. Okay. So the seminar leader would initially always begin the seminar after, as we said, making everyone feel comfortable and having a little discussion on how everyone read and how was the reading experience this week, and so on and so forth. They will talk about, again, what motivated them to join the seminar today, right? They could have skipped. They could have just had a lazy day and not shown up. So what motivated them? Then the students will say, what, I read this quote and I really enjoyed this, and I'm really enjoying the process of learning. So they share the experience of learning and how they're enjoying the process, inshallah. Then you can sort of go through the questions which are relevant to you for that particular seminar, like the initial expectations and impressions of the book based on the title of the author. Has that changed now that you've read a few more chapters? How is the book divided into chapters or sections? Is your conclusion about the chapters and section the same up to this point? And so on and so forth, right? So you go through the structure of the book, and then you always think about the purpose of the book. Is the author's primary goal still the same that you discussed as a first instance? And these questions will only take a few minutes initially in the first seminar of every book that you guys begin. But every seminar, it shouldn't take more than 5 to 7 minutes of a general revisit, inshallah. Right. Then as we learned, we have to go through the grammar stage of each chapter, right? So you analyze the chapter structures and themes, right? This is where you inspect and you sort of have an elementary go through of the book at hand, right? So you discuss the structure of the chapter at hand, and how many points are there, how many key arguments are there, subheadings, headings, and subheadings underneath that, and then within subheadings, how many points are there? So you are analyzing a structure, okay? You're seeing how does the author think, how does the author organize his ideas and arguments, and so on and so forth, and all the things that you were supposed to do as readers during the week. So this shouldn't be too long, because everyone is speaking now. They can, one by one quickly share their, inshallah, ideas. And not everyone has to speak on every question, inshallah. If it's too simple and someone has answered the same thing, you don't have to speak, inshallah. Just keep it simple and keep it natural, keep it flowing. You just go through these questions, inshallah, in the seminar, as many as are important, because not every question will be relevant in every seminar. So the same seminar leader, he decides for themselves or for herself or himself what question is she going to pick or he going to pick for his seminar. And then they would always try to reflect what they've read in the book. They can't contrast that with their personal experience. Reflect on their personal experience. Okay, how does the author's discussion resonate with your own experiences with the topic under discussion? So, for example, as you, mashallah, a lot of you were reading and they were saying, oh, you know what, this reminds me of my personal experience with reading such and such literature and so on and so forth. That is exactly what you guys are doing. Okay, so we want that kind of discussion, right? Inshallah. So everyone sort of gives in, sends in their reflections, inshallah, in that seminar, and so that everyone benefits from it, and everyone should be actively taking notes and benefiting from the reflections of others, inshallah. Okay. And then, have you encountered similar ideas or challenges in your own pursuit of the topic at hand? For example, if she's saying to you, the author, if she's saying to you that you should be, having a journal, and you should be, for example, let's say she was saying how, not everyone is, trained to be at a level where they can read good literature, right? This is something that you need to learn, right? So that is a challenge. Have you come across that kind of challenge in your own pursuit of, in this case, learning, right? So inshallah, you would have those kind of discussions on, personal reflections. And then the discussion can sort of go into the key concepts that have been discussed, and then you can, this is where you can start to be a bit more, picky. You can say, you know what, he talked about, or he or she talked about these 5 different concepts. Let's talk about this concept first, and do we agree with this argument? And so, just understand the key concepts to the best of your ability. Can you explain to the best of your ability, as perfectly as possible, the concepts as are being painted by the author? Can you do that, inshallah? That's the purpose of this. Okay, and then you express your sort of emotional reaction to, are there any concepts that were thought-provoking? Are there any concepts that were, that challenged you? Are there any concepts that you found hard to comprehend, and so on and so forth? Right. So this is this portion was the debate on structure and themes. This is your personal reflection on it. And then this is where you start going a bit more critical now. You start attacking the key concepts, because then you want to analyze examples and case studies that support those concepts and arguments. Okay. And then once you've done that, then you can go and critically analyze. You can then start criticizing. Of course, first of all, you would start off with the author's writing style, his engagement with you as a reader, his strategies that he's employed to attract you, his literary devices, the use of imagery, metaphor, idiom, whatever the case may be, right? And the level of his vocabulary and language usage. Is he very sophisticated, academic, technical, difficult, or is it just simply, basic that you can understand? It's a self-help. So this book that you're reading is not supposed to be too difficult. It's supposed to be written as a basic self-help book for all people who want to educate themselves, right? So you can then ask the question, could it be changed for better effect, right? Could the author have written this a bit more easily, or made the sophisticated technical language a bit more easier for the wider audience, or at least for yourself? So have a discussion on the linguistic side of things. So can critically analyze his language. Then you can jump into the main arguments of the author. Can you spot its supporting evidence? Is it sound or flawed? And then you discuss the arguments that support these case studies and the concepts. Okay, so the argument that he's built with these concepts and case studies, you analyze those arguments and you find whether it's sound or flawed, and so on and so forth. What critique do you have for the author's various arguments? And this is the main crux of your discussion. This is where where the majority of your seminar should be taking place. Okay, inshallah, this is the main crux of it. So critically engaging with the text. And finally, to end with your seminar, as we said, reflection and action steps. What insights or questions has this chapter sparked for you, and how do you plan to incorporate them in your learning journey? Perhaps, learning journey further from this that you've read in this chapter, and so on and so forth. So you have those reflections on what you've learned and how you can act according to it, and so on and so forth. Right. And then what are you most excited to explore further as we continue our study of The Well-Educated Mind ID, this book that we are that we're studying, inshallah. Okay, so that is essentially the purpose and this or that's behind essentially the structure of how your education is going to look like, inshallah. So before I jump into the actual reading of the first chapter and we learn, inshallah, at least how you should be engaging, inshallah, with the texts. Are there any questions? We'll quickly take a few questions, inshallah, regarding what we've said. Okay, and then we'll jump on to the reading, inshallah. Yeah, so sister, she's clarifying, if the weekly seminars, will it just be the sisters on the Zoom? Yes, it will just be sisters on the Zoom, inshallah. No brothers, no men, not even myself, just the sisters, okay? Inshallah. Which Zoom link will we be using to conduct the weekly seminars? So the Zoom link, inshallah, will have a poll, inshallah, in the discussion channel, inshallah. If you guys want to use the Project Tajdeed Zoom channel, inshallah, or if everyone will just be comfortable using, the seminar leaders, Zoom channel for the discussion, inshallah, and then we'll just have use this Zoom channel for the monthly discussions, inshallah. Okay. Yes, very good question. Before or after preparing for the seminar, how can we confirm our conclusions and findings with you before mentioning it in the group? You can email it, inshallah, to us, okay? Or you can simply just mention your answer in the group, okay? You can do that, and because I'm always making sure that I can read through your discussions, inshallah. I'll find your questions, inshallah, okay? And I'll make sure that they are answered. Okay, inshallah. The point is that you start thinking, inshallah. Don't worry too much about getting everything correct, getting everything right in the beginning. You know, people, for example, when they start running initially, they injure themselves a lot, right? Because they don't know they don't know the right form, right? They injure themselves. When they get into lifting, they might break or rupture a few muscles here and there because they're not trained. As they better their form, as they learn, as they get better with the art of lifting and exercising and so on and so forth, they get cultured and they get more sophisticated and they don't injure themselves anymore. Okay, so the whole point is let yourself reason and think, and write as many things that come to your mind. The whole point is that you let your mind free now, but inshallah we'll make sure that through our discussions, inshallah, those things which are supposed to be in line with Islam, we make sure they stay in line with Islam, inshallah. Okay, but the point is that you ask questions. You have to ask questions. Asking good questions and questions which no question. I think this is something that really trumps a lot of students. No question is a bad question, okay? If it's asked sincerely and innocently, okay? Asking questions for the sake of asking questions is good only when it comes to learning, okay? So the more you challenge yourself to think, the better it is for your mind initially, because then you get trained to asking the right questions. You get trained, you understand what a good question is. Inshallah, you read some literature later on in the program, and you'll see how people ask questions, and those questions are wrong. So you learn to differentiate between good questions and bad questions, because it just comes down to, as we said, reading more and getting trained in the art of learning and thinking. So I want to now jump into today's reading. I want to go through it, okay, inshallah? So I'm just going to share the screen with you guys. Right. Yeah, it should be able to see the screen. Can everyone see the screen, inshallah? Okay. طيب. Okay. So, as we said, we want to, so this session from now onward, inshallah, it will be slightly fast-paced. So I want everyone to, buckle up, inshallah, and stay put. طيب. So, I'm going to keep the chat on the side. I'm going to be asking questions, rapid fire questions to you, okay? And I want you to answer because you've done the reading, okay? So now, if I was to ask you, how many parts does this book have? Quickly. Okay, everyone, quickly. 2 parts. Very good. Before we begin, in fact, what is the name of the book? Good. Who's the author? Very good. Susan Wise Boer. Very good. Does anyone know who she is? Does anyone care to look her up? Her other works, her other authorship, the the kinds of work she authors, or other works that she's written other than this book? Very good. That's actually written in this book. Well done. Any other? One of the sisters, she says she's done a similar book for children, the classical education for children. Very good. She is an American author. Well done. Right. So one sister says she looked a little into her. She seems like an activist for self-education and literature. Well done. Well done. And she's written history books. Well done. Right. So before we even begin reading this book, we already know what the book is about. Of course, we have an inkling from the title, The Well-Educated Mind, right? But because from her background and from what she's written and what she sort of activates for, she is a big, huge proponent for a classical education, right? For a classical education for children and a classical education for the adults, for those adults who did not have an opportunity for the classical education, right? So, and that by classical education we mean this self-guided education, reading the classics, using the right toolbox, and so on and so forth, right? So well done. So she's basically going to sort of propel the same case in this book as well, right? So she's talking about a classical education from not from an Islamic perspective, but because she's from America, she's of course from that Western Hemisphere. She's going to propel a case for classical education from a Western liberal perspective. Okay, so we can already gauge as to what she's going to be writing about, and then we also know what the title is, The Well-Educated Mind, right? And of course, she's going to tell you what education is according to her Western philosophy and what an educated mind looks like according to her understanding, right? Now, before we even begin, we can start asking some questions. Some good questions would be, okay, well, if she's saying a well-educated mind, she's using the connotation phrase well, not badly educated mind. She's using so she already assumes that the education that she's going to propose is definitely going to be something that is going to be beneficial for the mind, right? I hope everyone is with me, right? So she's assuming the goodness, she's putting a moral claim to her argument already. The well-educated mind is the mind that is educated according to this classical, liberal, Western model. So that's an assumption that she's already portrayed. Okay, unless you've caught that, right, you'd be a bit lost through the book, okay? Because you need to make a judgment initially, just from her background, just from her authorship, the style that she employs with the books, and the background that she's coming from, okay? So So the education that she's talking about, and she's a proponent for, and she's using the connotation well, good for, is an education that is the Western liberal classical education. طيب. Now we ask ourselves, before we even begin reading any of this book, how does that interact with our understanding of Islam, right? How does that interact with our understanding of the world as Muslims, right? Is there an education that is better than Islamic education? Can there be an education which is, um, you know, that educates and enlightens the mind more than the Quran and the Sunnah, right? Of course, from a theological perspective, from an ontological perspective, from a perspective of being an ummah of the Quran, we know that the answer to that is clear cut. No, the Quran doesn't have the same view, right? It is opposing to Islamic view, right? So based on the opposition that we as Muslims have, we can ask a few more questions. Okay, what does Islam propose as education? So then once we have that sort of idea, as we read through this book, we'll be able to contrast. We'll be able to see parallels between our understanding of education, and we'll be able to see contrasts, things which are in opposition to our Islamic view. So when we talk about Islam, education primarily, ilm, is not to do with comprehensive education, the reading of history, the reading of X, Y, and Z subjects. Education is solely two things. One is tawheed, and the second is tarbiyah, right? Primarily, that is what education is, right? A lot of the Sahaba could not even read and write. Majority of the Sahaba could not even read or write. So you can be educated. Your mind could be one of the highest, the most enlightened minds to have ever existed in the world, and not know how to read or write. That is what Islam tells us, because true enlightenment comes from the Book of Allah Azza wa Jal and the Sunnah of the Messenger of Allah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Okay, so we already have certain conclusions that we are relying on in our Islamic paradigm. Then we can contrast that, right? So now, once we understand her sort of background, and inshallah, when you analyze authors before you even begin reading their book, it'll allow you to take their word with a pinch of salt. You'd take caution when you read, what they have to say. For example, if you read a book called The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins, and you know that Richard Dawkins is a completely ludicrous person. He's a complete lunatic, and someone who is filled with hatred and enmity for religion and especially Islam, then you know that things that he's going to be writing are not going to be written from an unbiased manner. It's going to be highly biased, right? So you'll be more critical. So knowing about the author, their background, their perspective, their agendas, it sort of it tunes your mind. Okay, it sort of tunes your mind to be a bit, just to be careful. For example, if I was to tell you that I'm going to make you walk through the hills of say um the Lake District Park in England, and we know that there are no harmful snakes or harmful animals that dwell in the mountains, you'd be a lot more comfortable treading those pathways, right? You'd be a lot more comfortable trekking through the Lake District, right? However, if I was to tell you that you have to go through the desert of Afghanistan, where you never know when you might step on a landmine, and blow yourself up, or you might get shot in the head by some militia, right? You can see the contrast, right? You'd be a lot more careful, right? You'd use every single last ounce of caution and critical presence, right, to navigate that kind of landscape. Is everyone with me, inshallah? Is everyone following the trajectory that we're taking, inshallah? So tuning yourself before you even get into the literature. طيب? Now, let's get to the book now, inshallah. The conclusion that she's making, we can jump at the back of the book, right? You can look at the end of the book here. I think there's something at the back. Oh, no, not here. I think it's, let's have a look. Oh, there you go. This is the back of the book. So the back of the book normally, gives you a very good idea as to what the book is going to be about, right? Are you reading the newspaper when you could be reading a book? Have you missed out on or lost the enjoyment of great literature? Using the techniques and systems of classical education, this new guide will give you, so this is what this guide is supposed, this book is a guide, right? It's a self-help guide. It's not Homer, it's not Odyssey, this is not, Shakespeare, this is not Dickens, this is none of that. This is a guide, a self-help guide, right? For you to be able to start educating yourself on a classical education framework. So it's a guide. It will give you greater pleasure in what you read and a greater understanding of it. So a means of educating yourself, right? And then she gives you a little recipe, a few minutes a day, 4 times a week, will enable you to read challenging novels or complex historical arguments with ease and understanding. Keep a diary of thoughts and reactions to what you have read. Discuss materials with a reading partner. Understand the historical continuities and innovations in the genres of fiction, autobiography, history, drama, and poetry. That is the summary of the book, right? That's exactly what she's going. These first 3 things are discussed in the first part of the book, right? And then this essentially is going to be the second part of the book. This back of the book essentially gives you everything the book is supposed to give you. So you understand the book is going to give you a roadmap how to read effectively, educate yourself, right? Keep a diary of thoughts. So you're wrestling with your thoughts, and the whole point of it is to elevate your thoughts and your ideas and your concepts, not just your factual memorization, rote memorization of facts, right? It's supposed to be then discussed with a reading partner, a group, whatever the case may be, right? So that's consolidated, you're articulating what you've learned, you can speak your mind, and so on and so forth. And then you can do that on a plethora of literature, on various forms of literature, fiction, autobiography, and so on and so forth, all the examples that she is given. Is everyone with me, inshallah? So this is essentially what we are painting. Once we've read the background of the author, once we've gone through the name of the author, the name of the book, the background of the author, once we looked at the back of the book, we already know what the book is essentially about, right? And we can reason a lot more, inshallah, if we perhaps, sort of probed a few things, right? Are you reading the newspaper when you could be reading a book? You could ask yourself, so she's assuming something, right? Reading a newspaper is less valuable than reading a book. Why is that? Should reading a newspaper always be less valuable than reading a book? No, right? Especially when you're being attacked by intruders in your country. You should be aware, and at that point, it'd be your Shari'i faridah. It will be an obligation according to Sharia for you to be more in line with this type of reading than this type of reading. The Sharia would condemn this type of reading and would propose that you read the newspaper so that you're aware how many of your, men and women of your nation have been killed, so that you remain on guard and you can protect yourself and your family and so on and so forth. Okay? So, assumptions. Have you missed out on or lost the enjoyment of great literature? Of course, then she's assuming that she's speaking to an audience which has lost the enjoyment of great literature. But that's, of course, very few people who actually value the education that she's proposing, right? So she's speaking to a very small niche of people from what she's assuming, because she's speaking to a generation who, according to her, has lost the enjoyment of great literature. Who wants to read great literature anyway, right? When you have so much going on in the scientific realm, you have so many discoveries in technology and IT and artificial intelligence and so forth, right? She's assuming a lot of things, isn't she? Right? So then, of course, we also understand from this that, and you can ask and you can question her ambitions. She's not proposing a STEM education. I'm sure everyone is aware of the STEM education, right? The education of sciences, right? Technology and so on and so forth, right? So STEM education. She's not proposing STEM education. STEM education is another form of education, which is not exactly classical education, right? And STEM education is required for a completely different purpose, right? So when you understand her, when you read these things, inshallah, she's giving you a very clear-cut understanding of what kind of education she's speaking about. She's not speaking about the education within sciences, practical application of sciences, applied physics or theoretical physics or mathematics or pure math. She's not giving you, that kind of education. She's taking you back towards the old great literature of the people who have changed the world. But then, of course, you could perhaps ask yourself, is not the work of Einstein, now that once it's been written and changed the world, a piece of great literature, even though it's all mathematics and numbers, right? So these are the questions that you should be sort of priming yourself for when you're reading. And this is before we've even begun the act of actual reading. But we understand what she's basically going to be doing. The guide essentially is going to give you how to read, how to keep a diary of thoughts and reactions, what you're reading, and so you can wrestle with the book, discuss with a partner, and be able to read lots and lots of different types of literature. And then she's going to, of course, mention the benefit of engaging with this literature and not literature like newspapers and less valuable literature. Of course, we can ask questions like, oh, surely, she's correct. Normally speaking, books are more valuable than newspapers, and I'd agree with you. But this is not the point. This is not the time to judge her at the moment. We're just gauging her agenda. We're just gauging her mind at the moment. Is everyone with me, inshallah? We're not critiquing her. We're just understanding her mind, the mind of the author. Okay, inshallah? So now let's jump into the book. Now, let's start talking about the structure of the book, okay? How many parts is the book, quickly? 2 parts. What does the first part talk about? Right, it talks about preparing for classical education. Right. And what is the second part preparing for? We're talking about, what does it talk about? The second part? It guides on how to read the great books. Is that it? She's already given you the guide on how to read the great books. She's already told you what grammar stage and logic stage and rhetoric stage, all of these stages are. She's already told you how to read great books. Is that exactly what the second part is about? Come on, be a bit more exact, inshallah. You can do this. Yes, yes, well done. Right. So in the first part, she's just giving you the toolbox. She's just introducing you to the act of reading, right? How you should read, how you should educate yourself, how you should and why you should find a partner to discuss things with, and what the stages of reading are, and the act of just getting into the books. She's just taken you to the doors of knowledge. She's not actually thrown you inside the gates, right? So the second part essentially is where she takes you by hand and makes you read different types of literature, and she guides you applying what she's taught you in part one, right? What she's taught you in part one, applying it on different types of genres, right? Different genres of literature. Inshallah, is that clear? Is everyone on the same page with me on that, inshallah? Is that the understanding you guys have, inshallah? Well done. Well done. Right? So now we've just spanned the book so we've sort of divided into 2 parts. Well done. How many chapters does the first part have? How many chapters does the first part have? All right. One of the sisters says 4. Is it because it says 1, 2, 3, 4 over here, sister? Is that where you guys are taking your hint from? Or have you actually gone through it? No, just the first part. There's just the first part. We've said the whole book is 2 parts. Let's come back to the first part now. Right, let's come back to the first part. The first part is how many chapters? Right, well done. The sisters who said it's 4 chapters. One of the sisters says she actually was clever enough to actually take a sneak peek, and she said it's 4. And one of the other sisters, she says it was a guess. In either case, it's correct, right? But you should have been able to do this as a first step without having to guess. and without having to take a sneak peek on my screen here, right? This is a part, these are the first stages that you should be taking in your reading. You should be able to say exactly how the book is structured, right? And then inshallah towards the end, you will be able to create your own structure of the book, because then you can organize your own thoughts according to how you want to organize them, not according to how the author has done it, okay? And when you try and reorganize things, that is actually a very good strategy for consolidating and learning material, because then you're creating something, and creation out of something is one of the highest forms of learning. Okay, you're creating something. One of the first things I did when I started studying Nahu, I restructured the entire study of Nahu. Right, the first book I read was a comprehensive book, but it was a beginner book, right? And I spent 8 to 10 hours every single day for at least 3 4 days, just thinking about the author has structured the study, the science of Nahu, grammar, in this particular manner. Could I do a better job, or could I think of it differently, right? So I did that for 4 days, 6 to 8 or 10 hours a day, and then I, alhamdulillah, came up with a new structure. And to me, that structure made a lot more sense. But whatever the case may be, my structure or his structure being better, that's not the point. The point is, I went through a journey in which, to create a new structure out of a given structure, I had to think outside the box. I had to understand some key premises, the key some key topics, key terminology, to be able to categorize things a bit more differently, right? So when you, inshallah, sort of do that, you'll be forced to think about text a bit more deeply. طيب. So there's 4 chapters to the first part. And how many chapters do we have for the next part, for the part 2? Yes, very good. 5 chapters. طيب. Since we are still in the first part, we'll stop here and we'll look at, I've already done some of the work for you over here. Okay. So you'll notice I have my notes here, which are colored differently. I have my notes, which are colored blue and red and yellow, and so on and so forth. I hope everyone can see that, inshallah, okay? Now, the blue notes are going to be structural notes. I'm going to be structuring things within blue notes, okay? The red notes are going to be questions I ask, okay? And then the yellow notes are going to be the key arguments, okay? The key arguments. And then within those key arguments, I'll just summarize some of the important arguments that they have some of the key points they've made within the argument. So I'm sort of breaking down as I read things into its structure, into the questions I'm thinking of, and I'm highlighting the important concepts and arguments as I read through. I've just given you a sample here, right? So you can see structure of the book, part 1, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, and then you would, instead of saying what each chapter is about, right, you turn the title of the chapter into a question, because then as you're going through the structure, you're testing yourself, you're testing your recall. Okay, so when you structure things, turn things into questions, not statements, into questions. So instead of saying the chapter 1 is, as it says over here, for example, it says training your own mind, the classical education you never knew. So instead of saying the first chapter is about the classical education, you ask the question, what is classical education? Because that is the question she's going to answer in chapter 1. And perhaps you might not be familiar with, if that is the question she's trying to answer. Maybe you don't maybe say you don't get that from just reading this title. Then what you should be doing is quickly, right, start skimming through the text, jump in and then jump out, right? Zoom in and zoom out of the text just to see where she's going with this. So she's going to give you a little structure of where, of the chapter, and about a bit of about herself, right? And she's talking about reading in all of this, her experience with education, and so on and so forth. And then, reading great literature. And then she said, you don't have to go through the same grind as she did, or ringer, as she says, right? And then she quotes some case studies and examples to support her point, and how it was actually a culture of educating yourself, reading the great literature, of course, in that hemisphere. So yeah, because we do believe as Muslims that we have to have a certain type of, teacher or mentor that would guide our thought and beliefs according to Islam as we read literature, which is not according to our understanding as Muslims. So she's going to give you a few case studies to support her, thesis that you can and you should be relying on self-education because that was the norm back in the day, right? And she did that when she went to education through to a graduation, a graduate program at the master's that she did, and she paints some, not so positive points about her experience and how you don't have to go through it. طيب. And then she just gives you a lot of examples and so on and so forth, right? And then, of course, as she has given you the hope that you can educate yourself in that liberal manner, how the Thomas Jeffersons of the day were educating themselves, she gives you a question. What if your mind is hungry? So now she's motivated you to actually jump into that type of education, but you're not particularly prepared for that type of education. You're not particularly literate enough, right, to be able to educate yourself in that, to engage in that kind of education, right, because that is where the value lies. That kind of education is valuable, right? And you can ask questions, are her claims, whatever the case may be, but we're just skimming in, right? We're just going through that quickly. So examples, and then she gives you a bit more examples and exercises to prove a point, and how to check yourself as to if you're literate enough or not, how much work you need to do on yourself, and so on and so forth. And she's giving you some, what's distinctive about classical education, right? So you can see from all of this that she's talking about reading the great books, how it was used by, this idea of reading the great books was used by the classical educationists and scholars like Thomas Jefferson and others, and why it is. She's talking about what that education is, how that education looked like, and why it's distinctive. And she's giving examples of Bacon and so on and so forth. And then she gives you some more exercises, and she teaches you about different components of that education: grammar, logic, and rhetoric, the trivium that she calls it. And then she leaves you with a bit of a practical advice how to begin. Now that she's convinced you this is the type of education that you should be getting. Of course, we're not totally convinced. Of course, we're going to criticize her primary principles, but we agree in principle. We agree in general with her that this is a good type of education because Muslim scholars were also engaged in this type of education. But inshallah, we can get to that. So within 3-4 minutes, right, just go through this and you're done, right? All she's done is she's taught you what is classical education. So within 2-3 minutes, you've turned all of that into a question. What is classical education? Okay? Well, 3 minutes or 5 minutes, take 10 minutes, doesn't matter. Those 10 to 15 minutes are going to be very, very valuable when you come back to rereading the chapter, because you're just reading one chapter a week. If you could answer that question, after skimming of the chapter, that shows your skill as a reader. But the second reading will give you a lot more perspective. And the third reading, when you start to engage things, with things a bit more critically, you'd be able to analyze her entire case in all of its structure, in arguments, and its sub-arguments, its examples, its evidence, and so on and so forth. Okay, so you sort of unpack the structure bit by bit. This is the first level of structure. The book. This is the entire book. Part 1, Part 2. Part 1, 4 chapters. Part 2, 5 chapters. Chapter 1 is about what is classical education. She's trying to answer this question. Okay, what question is she answering in chapter 2? Well, she's going to be teaching you about the act of reading, right? So she's answering what is reading. What is the act of reading? So she's going to talk about that, right? And then in chapter 3, she's going to be telling you about the journals and commonplace books and so on and so forth. So we understand that the question she's answering over there is, what are the tools required for tackling the great books, right? Because of course, as she said initially, that she is preparing you for that type of education where you are engaging with the great books, right? And then number 4, chapter 4, will of course will be answering the question how to actually read the great books effectively for the greatest benefit. So she explains you the grammar stage and logic stage and the rhetoric stage in a bit more practical manner. And she sets you off for part two, where you'll be engaging with different genres of reading. Okay. Has anyone broken down the book like this when they read the chapter or the chapters, or before they even read the chapters? Did anyone attempt the reading in this manner? So I'm assuming most of you didn't, of course, because this is your first attempt to reading difficult books and this type of education, inshallah. So it's completely fine, inshallah, right? Even if you didn't do it. But do you see the benefit of this? The point of this exercise is to show you, do you see the benefit of this, inshallah? Does everyone see the benefit of this approach? Exactly. So if you learn through this manner, right, it's like by the end of the book, it will be like you've memorized the entire book, but by heart. It's arguments. It's This is how, when you see scholars and highly educated men or women in debate, or when they give khutbah, you see them recall so many facts and quotations and this and that. This is how that happens, right? It doesn't happen by rote memorization. It doesn't happen by memorizing every single word of the author. This is how they engage deeply with the books, that allows them to have that kind of recall, because they've wrestled with the book, right? They've gone through that extra mile. They've gone the extra mile to consolidate those memories and concepts and ideas. Okay, so now, since today's seminar is just an introductory seminar, I'm giving a sample, let's just focus on what is classical education. And of course, we are already, hour and a half in, mashallah. Hope you guys are not tired already. Just let me know when you guys get tired, okay? Because I am just getting started. We haven't even, touched the surface properly. Right. So now what we can do is we can put a note here, okay? And okay, just turn it blue. Okay. And if I can just sort of so chapter 1. So this is the blue notes, as I mentioned, are supposed to be for structure, correct? So now let's quickly go through the book and analyze and put down her structure. So her structure is starting off. So we're not going to be engaging in the particulars. We're going to be engaging in the generals, right? So she's going to be starting off her story. Okay, so just that's the first part, right? And we can add a note over here. Personal story, and we can add to it later. So we're just creating a structure, okay? This structure, the first point is her story. Okay, good. Move on. So all of that is, and I found myself dreading the coming of year of classes. I've been teaching, and right? There's a twist that she was dreading the experience, but then to her relief, the graduate seminars weren't lectures and so on and so forth. So inshallah, we'll mention that later. She's going to explain all of that. Experience, her story. As soon as that story is finished, she makes a point by saying that you don't have to go through the so this is the point where she's saying graduate programs are not necessary for an education that enlightens. Okay, so I'm just being rough, right? I was going to do this before the seminar, but I thought it would be a good idea just do it in live, in action, just so you guys can see, right? Then all of this is just to support this point. So she said over here, graduate programs are not necessary for an education that enlightens, and she's going to support that by saying that uh, in antiquity, it was the norm to educate yourself through a self-reading or self-education via the classics or the great books. Okay, so that's the point. The second, that's the structure that she's building. Her story, then she goes into, well, you don't have to do what I did, right? Because the norm was that this kind of education was what was commonplace, and everyone used to educate themselves. And she's going to give you some examples and so on and so forth over here, with regards to Thomas Mann Randolph. And his letter, this was a letter, the initial seminar that we had. It was a letter written by Thomas Jefferson sent to this man, Thomas Mann Randolph, that we read together in the previous seminar, right? This is the link to it. And I believe this was, did I share this with you guys? The document that we went through? If I didn't, just remind me, inshallah, I'll send this guy to you guys later, okay? So just remind me, inshallah. I'll send it to you guys, inshallah, okay? So you can actually go to this link as well. You can find the document yourself, but because I've taken it out and I've put it in a PDF, I think it would just be more convenient. Just remind me, inshallah, in the discussion, so I can send it to you in the Telegram discussion channel, inshallah. So she then builds a case as to how you educate yourself, as to she's supporting cases, how you should educate yourself, and she's just building up the case of self-education by giving examples. Young Randolph was able to build on the foundation of a privileged education and limited to the learning they could acquire for themselves once a brief period of formal education has ended. American women of the last 2 centuries kept journals and commonplace books, chronicling their reading, met with each other, and took responsibility for developing their own minds. So here, she's making a sub-point, which I will just leave that over here, because all of this will come under the norm. How it wasn't this form of education, the education by the classics, wasn't just used by the elite of the day. It was used by normal laymen as well. And this is an interesting quote. Self-education begins where school education ends, she wrote sternly. But we're not going to pay attention to this because that would take us to a more analytical reading. We don't want to pay attention to this. Nice quote. We've taken a note of this in our minds, but this is part of the first structure where she's going to be painting the norm. Right. She's detailing her, how they would read classics together, having commonplace book and reading together, reading club and so on and so forth. Right. And she mentioned some books. And this is the point after that. So far, she's only done two things: her personal story, and the graduate programs are not necessary for any education that enlightens. So these 2 points over here, as we've mentioned. Over here now, she is going to talk about what if you're not ready, right? What if you're not ready? How do you check or train yourself to acquire that kind of education? Okay, so that's the kind of question she's answering in this third point that she's making in this chapter. Were you guys doing this when you were reading through your personal, in your personal time, when you were reading it to, yourselves? Were you breaking down the whole book into these chapters? Well done, mashallah. Yes, mentally is not good. You have to make sure that you put things down onto paper. Okay. Yes. Yes. So underlining things, and so one sister says she was circling and underlining things. Did you get a physical copy of this book, sister? Exactly, right. So, mashallah, well done. This is your statements have highlighted a common problem. This is where people jump into the particulars before they understand the general structure, her thought pattern. You see, when you enter into debate and analysis and discussion, if you don't read the structure of someone's thought, right, you will not be able to critique them properly. You will miss the trees for the forest, literally speaking, right? You will miss the forest for the trees. You'll essentially be focusing on things which are not perhaps not even that important. Okay, miss some particular quote, some particular statement that she makes that you find interesting. There's a time for that, but after this stage, after you've highlighted and broken down her thought into structures, into patterns. Okay, so as I said, elementary, grammar stage, structural analysis of her thought. That is the first thing that you should be doing, right? First thing you should be doing. Inshallah, all of you, okay? Just make sure you guys do that. Once and only once you've, done that structural breakdown, the skeletal breakdown of the entire chapter, her entire thought through a chapter, only then you're allowed to start highlighting and underlining and circling things to the point, inshallah, unless you get to a point where you become perhaps trained enough that you can do all of this at once. I'm just doing this for you guys. I could be doing this. I could be doing structures and substructures, like all of this at one time, and I could be critiquing all of a point. Like I could just do this, right, in one go. But because as a beginner, you guys are still training up for that, inshallah. So make sure highlighting, underlining, scientifically speaking, are completely useless. Highlighting, circling, just quotes, just statements, scientifically speaking, it's not a very good method. It will not be conducive to your learning. Okay. So make sure you are actively engaging with the text by breaking down the thought of the author. Okay. And then, inshallah, once you've broken down the thought, as we are doing at the moment, right, inshallah, once you come to the particulars of it, then you can say, you know what, okay, in this point, she's talked about X, Y, and Z points. And within X, Y, and Z points, these are the sub-points or evidences. And from this, I find this particular thing interesting because then you'll know where that quote, where that line feeds into the bigger structure of the chapter that the author has written. Is that clear for everyone, inshallah? Okay. I don't want to put down anyone. All of you, mashallah, have given a very good try to your reading. But just to highlight, the whole point is that you guys learn to be better readers, inshallah. So just highlighting codes or lines and circling, that will be a waste of time for your own learning. Because a lot of university students, they do that, and I know that, but it's a waste of time, right? It is more conducive that you, right, it's more conducive that you start breaking the structure down, understanding the thought of the author, inshallah, okay? Just as a piece of advice for all of you. You can write all of this. If you have a book, you can do this kind of structure on your physical copy of the book. If you don't have that, right? If you don't have a physical copy, if you have an iPad, or as the sister says, she has some other writing pad, remarkable pad or something, like you can do that on it as well, right? But do this process. Yes. So as a starting point, I would say no highlighting and no underlining, right? Don't do that as a starting point. The starting point is to skim the chapter the first time for the question that you bring out of it. What is the question that the chapter? You see, guidebooks, self-help books, guides. they're supposed to answer questions. They're supposed to guide you in on certain topics, right? What is the question that she's answering in the first chapter? So you go through the question, the chapter quickly and write down that question. Chapter 1 is about what is classical education. That is the question she's trying to answer. Then you go through to it again. How is she actually answering that question? Well, she's going to explain her story first, right? Then she's going to say, well, you don't have to go through the pain that I went through, right? This kind of education was a norm, and not just for the elites, but for the common men as well, right? And then she's going to support that claim. And then she's going to say, well, now that I've painted a very good, in a very golden picture of everything that the classical education is, are you ready for it? Right? And all of this is happening within the classical education part, right? And then she's going to give you some tools and tests to see if you're ready or not. And if you're not ready, how you should get ready, and so on and so forth. You see, I've only read this book once, I'd say 5, 6 years ago. And I'm reading it again with you guys today, right? And even when we are preparing, these notes, right? The notes are up till this point, we've only provided you general guidance, right? We've not given you guides specifically for this book yet. So I'm doing this literally. This is not to show off or anything. I'm giving you everything that's happening in real time. This is what you should be doing, right? And I've quoted you everything that she's saying in the first book off by heart, right? By just skimming that. And you'd think I'd read her page, this chapter a few times for me to be able to do the seminar. And as you guys know how busy I am, that's not the case. I don't find time to read things many times now, unless of course it's the Islamic literature that we have to, because we teach that in the Jamia, and it's serious literature, we can't be. But you get the point, right? Just by skimming first and answering a question and then structuring the chapter, like you learn so much more. You take away so much more. Inshallah. So you take away so much more. So important that you do that. Okay, inshallah. Because when you circle, so science says when you circle things and you simply highlight things with your highlighters and you underline things, you are fooling your mind to think that you're doing something active, but really it's one of the most passive forms of engaging with the material. You shouldn't be doing that. You should be asking yourself questions again. Okay, what is she saying next? What is she saying next? How does this connect to her previous point? Or how is the structure of this argument? How is this chapter flowing? Right? So the more answers you're trying to find to the questions you're asking yourself, right? The more actively you engage. And inshallah, you'll notice only after an hour of hard work like this, your brain will start hurting, because you'll say, I want to take a break. And that happens. Okay, inshallah. So then she's, of course, going to, over here, talk about what if you're not ready, how do you check/train yourself to acquire that kind of education, and she's going to give you through some tests and advice. And as she says, sustained serious reading is at the center of the self-education project, just to, further explain that point, that you have to read, and you have to read serious literature, and that is at the heart of self-education. Observation, reading, conversation, attendance at lectures are all educational pursuits, as Isaac Watts goes on to tell us. But he concludes that reading is the most important method of self-improvement. Why? Because when you read, you're not just reading, you're having a conversation with the greatest minds that have ever lived on this planet, right? You're not just attending a lecture, you are reading the script of a master lecturer, right? You're not observing, you're observing through the eyes of the masterful observer. Okay, so reading is the most important method of self-improvement and self-education, because you benefit from the observation and conversations and analysis of the greatest minds that have ever walked the earth. Of course, in their respective fields, even if according to Islamic standards, when it comes to a lot of things, they were the most misguided individuals to have ever walked the earth. Right, so this is a very important code, right? I would be thinking, what, I want to highlight this. It looks very nice, but I wouldn't do that at this stage. Okay, I wouldn't do that. I would move on. because I've taken a note of that in my mind, right? But I know what she is doing in order to sort of sell us this idea that, you are hungry, you want to educate yourself in this way, you want to be like the Leibniz and Newton and Thomas Jefferson and the great minds, the philosophers, Shakespeare and so whatnot, right? But you're not ready for that kind of education. What do? So she's building the case up for that, right? She's giving you, more evidence as to how important reading is, and this reading is, is the only type of reading that would actually benefit you is a reading of the classics, the great books. When you read the highest form of literature, you start to think in the highest form of thought, right? You start to speak as, the most articulate members of our human race, and so on and so forth, okay? And then she quotes Mortimer Adler, reading alone allows us to reach out beyond the restrictions of time and space to take part in what Mortimer Adler has called the great conversation of ideas that began in ancient times. So she's just basically bigging up this idea of reading and proving to you why reading is important. By the way, this book by Mortimer Adler is the first book of our actual program. Right now, we're just, in the trial period, getting people warmed up for the actual reading. Mortimer Adler, his book also tackles the idea of self-help, self-learning. But his book is, of course, inshallah, when you read that book, you'll know that his book is a lot more difficult. His prose is a lot more difficult than this lady's. Okay, inshallah. But sustain and serious, so she's sort of building the case up. Sustain and serious reading always been a difficult project. Television easy, reading difficult. Print culture is doomed. Different apocryphal prophecies, but no, print is still here. Television may be pernicious, but reading is no harder, and so on and so forth, right? She's just building up that case for. And reading is a discipline like running, right? So she's essentially built up to that case now, where she's going to prove to you that, yes, like running, like meditation, she says, voice lessons or whatever the case may be, like any other particular skill, reading is a discipline, and you need to take it seriously if you want to be doing some serious heavyweight lifting in reading. Okay, so she's just going to same thing. She's just building up the same point. If you're not ready, how to get ready, how to train yourself. The inability to tackle unaided a list of great books and stick to the project doesn't demonstrate mental inadequacy, just a lack of preparation, right? So she's just basically getting to that point on and on. She has gone through a few paragraphs just to get to this point. You could have summarized this, right? You could have just said, you know what, you want to train yourself, but so and so forth. Reading is important. You understand that? Well, this is how you do it. You prepare for it. It's a discipline. Summarized, easy, done. But because it's a book, she has to fill some pages in. She has to make herself feel valuable. She has to do this. So most people assume that because they know how to read words, they know how to study, and some of the students, I think they raise some of these concerns as well, right? Because you think that you learn to study, it doesn't mean that you actually know how to acquire wisdom through the books. You know how to actually learn through things just because you can acquire some facts. But the opposite is true. Okay. And then she proves all of that. And she, within that same point, she says, university education is useless, secondary education is useless, all of that is useless. The world is full of self-improvement methods. What's distinctive about the classical education, right? All of that education is useless because what is missing is the training in the art of reading. Again, the same thing, training. You need training. You need training. You need to prepare yourself for that discipline. Same thing. You see, you could be taking so many notes in these 4 to 5 to 6 paragraphs, but she has said nothing new. She's still talking about, she's going on and on about the same thing, that you need to train yourself, right? Because it's a discipline, like any other discipline. If you didn't learn how to read properly in school, you can do it now. The methods of classical education are at your disposal. Because she has to sell you something, she has to tell you now what's distinctive about classical education, right? What's distinctive about classical education? This is where you can make your second structure and add a note over here. We can say, what is so special? And when you make these structures, you don't have to be so articulate, and you don't have to be exact. You can be yourself. You can even write in Cockney. Um, you can write slang, or you can write in chav if you want. I don't care. It just has to make sense to you. But of course, inshallah, over time you should be. Um, those of you who don't know what chav is, just bear with me, please. What is so special about classical education? Why this form of education? Okay, right. So now she's going to answer this question: why classical education? Some books are to be tasted. Well, classical education, because not all books are created equal. Okay, so she's going to be really building a case for why classical education. Not all books are equal, not all books are worthy of your time, and so on and so forth. So she's going to slowly come to the point and prove to you why and how you should pick your reading curriculum carefully. Some books are to be tasted, some to be swallowed, some to be digested, right? Some to simply find out facts, some to evaluate them, and some to form your own opinion, so on and so forth. Okay. And so, of course, she's going to, then talk about what this classical education is. She has to explain what the trivium is. Okay, the trivium is these three things: grammar, logic, and rhetoric stage of learning. Grammar, acquiring facts; logic, thinking about them, evaluating them; and then rhetoric is to express your opinions about them. Right? The first stage of education is called this, then da. So this is about collecting memorization, repetition, facts through memorization, repetition, and so on and so forth. Then is the critical thinking, logic stage, and moving on. So classically educated students know that this pattern applies to all later learning, all later analysis. This pattern of analyzing applies to all later consumption of information and learning material. Okay, so she's just this is the substructure. Okay, the substructure. So now, up till this point, could anyone quickly in a list give me the structure of chapter 1 quickly? So she started with her story. Then what? We said, look over here. You see how we were sort of taking notes, right? So you can use this as a guide for yourself if you want. So she mentioned her university story. Then she said, well, universities are not necessary for enlightening your minds, right? You can rely on self-education by classical education. And she builds a case for that for a few, paragraphs. But then she says, okay, it's so good, so great. What if you're not ready? Ready? Right? How do you train yourself? What's education? Okay. Then she says, right? Once you've gone through that idea to get, how do you train yourself and so on and so forth, she has to tell you why is classical education special? Why is classical education special? Right. This entire chapter so far is revolving around these four things. Okay? Well done, mashallah. Well done, you sisters. Good. Right, coming back. So then classical education, this is where she's essentially now breaking down what classical education actually is, right? So all of this has been about why you can in fact summarize all of the first 3 points because they don't really directly answer the question, which is what is classical education? All of this answers why classical education, right? Well, because education is all about enlightening your mind, and that it only happens through certain forms of learning, and reading is the most important. And when you read, you don't read, not all reading, not all literature is worth your time. So you should be reading the classics. And so therefore, classical education is the way forward. And now she's going to answer the actual question of the chapter, which is why is classical education special? So So classical education essentially is three-part or tripart. There's trivium, there's grammar, logic, and rhetoric stage, and she's going to explain that slightly. By the way, there's trivium, okay, and then there's quadrivium. These are stages of learning. So in a child education, so basically when you do come across these terms, do make a question over here on the side. I'm not writing any questions over here because we haven't got to the questions yet. But you could be, writing questions at the same time as they come to you. What is this trivium? What is this terminology? And when you look it up, there's a whole world of research that talks about classical education, and it's trivium, there's quadrivium, and then when you talk about quadrivium, the whole philosophy behind that. Okay. In some shape and form, it also existed in our lands, and in fact, this was taken from Dirasa Nizamiya that existed with the Muslims. This idea of trivium and quadrivium was taken from the Muslims. Dirasa Nizamiya, the seminary education that existed in amongst the Muslims, but slightly differently, adopted slightly differently by the Christians, right? And so on and so forth. Then she's going to explain to you why grammar stage is important. You shouldn't be jumping to conclusions. You shouldn't be highlighting texts too soon. You should be collecting all the structure, all the facts. You shouldn't be, highlighting quotes and circling, underlining things that you find important. No. Don't jump to the evaluation stage too early. Okay? Shazam. A good question. When do we underline unfamiliar terms? During the structural analysis or when you're doing proper reading? So when you're reading something for meaning, like as I'm doing now, and I came across something that I have no idea what it means. For example, like now I do know, but say I didn't know what trivium is, what she's referring to when she says trivium. I'll read it and I'll try and understand its meaning from the context, and I'll simply move on so I can complete my structure, right? I wouldn't try and open a dictionary at this stage. However, if I'm really stuck and the author has done a poor job at defining some of his terms, then I will have to look up just so that I can have just enough meaning so I can complete my skeleton of the chapter. You with me, inshallah? طيب. Right. So then this gives you what, this description of, so why is, so she's basically doing two things over here. She's saying, why is classical education special and what is it, right? Because this is the question she's answering. You see, this is a portion that we missed initially. And then as we read a bit more, we understood that she's actually talking about this point a bit more specifically, right? Now look over here. You see, we can see the structure. This is how to begin, right, your classical education journey. Right. This is the second point now. Right. So we can mention over here. Number 5 is how to begin your classical education journey. You see, so what I'm doing over here in my blue notes, you should be doing this in your journal. Okay, you should be doing this in your journal. And what you can do is if you had a physical copy, or if you have a tablet, for example, as I'm highlighting only the skeleton breakpoints, right? So over here, the first part finishes and the second topic begins. I'm just giving myself a little pointer, right? So you can put a star next to it or an arrow or point number 5, something just to give you an idea that this is where the next part of the structure begins, okay? And in your journal, right, what you should be doing is, after you've done this structural breakdown of the book, right, you right on top, once you've written this on top of the page, you come down, draw a line, and underneath you say chapter 1, what is classical education? And within that, underneath that, you mention these points. You start going through the book. On the book, mention like these pointers, and from that you just in your journal, you actually write down these questions. So this happens in your journal. These pointers happen in the book, just so that, you know, when you go back through the book, inshallah, you know where the structures are, where the structures, and just so that you can to navigate a bit more clearly. You can also do something else, which is you can, you know, sticky notes. I might have some here. If I can. I'm assuming you guys know what sticky notes are. Famous thing. I'll be honest. I'll be completely honest with you. In my entire life, I have actually never used sticky notes. You know, so so you can sort of just put these you know, pointers in the book, right? Just mark the book, inshallah, as you're reading through it. Okay. And so you can say, for example, the pink ones would mark the structure of the book. So every pink this sticky pointer, every pink would mark the structure, right, of the chapter, or the structure of the book. Or you can say blue color for the structure, this pink for the questions, yellow for the important quotations that you've underlined or you've later highlighted. With inshallah, I hope that makes clear sense. University of Manchester days, subhanAllah. Right. So good question. Can we write down all our ideas on the margins, blank pages of the book, rather than keeping a journal? You see, for certain books that you're not digesting, you're just tasting or swallowing, you could do that. You'd actually pass doing that. For example, there's a book here, which is Introduction to Logic. Okay. And because it's a textbook, I don't need to keep a journal for it. What I can do is, and it has, first of all, it has enough of a size of a page, right? It has lots of margins, has empty pages, right, at the beginning, at the back, and on the, you know, on the side of the pages as well. Plus, it has a very well laid out table of contents, right? And it's very well structured. Okay. And each of these are, you can see the points. So what I would do is, each chapter, when it begins, it gives you a blank page. So I would be summarizing, I would be doing all of this structural reading within this book. Okay. This is a classical, like, master's in philosophy, logic text, right? So any textbook sort of gives you that same kind of utility, inshallah. Okay. Another good question. If you borrowed a book from the library, I mean, I think I'm assuming you mean by the central library. How do you recommend marking the book? Ideally, you should be buying your own book if you find it interesting. So when you go through books in the library, right, skim through them, look through the main you know, the topics, the back and the front. If it's interesting enough for your own research, for your own studies, buy it. If you don't want to buy it and you only want to use it for tasting and swallowing purposes, then take that book then and use these sticky notes, right? Instead of marking things on it and writing in it, use these sticky notes, inshallah. Okay. And use a journal to keep your summaries in it, inshallah. Or you can just use so I have this sticky note. I actually bought another one for my so for the tafsir halaqa. I actually bought a bigger page sticky note, because I knew that on a single page, sometimes the notes for a single point can exceed. So this is a big enough page. It's still a sticky note, right? But it's not bigger than the page of the book itself. So I can place a page like this within that page of my tafsir. And if I'm, for example, explaining the word a'udhu, and I know the whole discussion on just the word a'udhu is going to span more than 2 pages, then I'll just keep all that discussion on these 2 pages and stick them inside the book. Okay, because I know that I don't have enough margin space for that kind of you know, information within the book itself. Okay, so I would buy these, I would invest in these things if I was heavily reliant on library books. Okay, something, and please don't quote me on this, like, you don't I hope that you guys don't, get me in trouble if I say this, subhanAllah, right? Uh, I was notorious for one thing, which is I would take uh, books from the library, and I would take notes inside the books. I would write inside those library books. Like I would perhaps very close to just not destroy, but heavily mark the book in my handwriting, and it was a library book with two intentions. One, that I was doing it in pencil, so I could easily erase it when I handed the book in, right? And secondly, perhaps in my hope to be of some benefit to others, I would just leave my notes inside the book and just hand that book back to the librarian, to the library, in the hope that if someone else read that book later after me, they will definitely thank me for doing all the hard work of highlighting the most important things, the structure, the questions I've taken out of them, and the quotations, and so much of and my commentary. My books had commentaries in it, right? SubhanAllah. So, inshallah. So, if you really are serious about educating yourself, buy your own books and write into them, own them, right? Really connect with that. You have to be intimate with your books. You have to be. Just forgive me for that phrase. You have to be intimate with your books. You have to, right? That is one of the ways that and I mean, SubhanAllah, think about this. Have you seen Hufad who memorized the Quran? By the end of the Hifz journey, they're most of them, not all of them, but most of the Hufad, their copies, the Mus'haf that they use, it's practically destroyed. It's practically worn out, worn from the corners and so on and so forth. Has anyone seen that? Has anyone seen that, inshallah? Yes, right? It's because the Quran is the most intimate thing that you have. It's the book of Allah Azza wa Jal, it's the speech of Allah. The more you spend time with it, the more pages are, unless you're like me who's very careful. My Quran is alhamdulillah is still very intact, and the only thing that's damaged is the cover of it slightly, but I got it I got it rebinded, but with the pages themselves are really alhamdulillah, they're really intact. Okay. But normally when you're reading so much from the same mushaf, it gets worn out, right? The same should happen with the great books that you own, right? And because subhanAllah, there's not very many books that you can read in your life. As I said, 500 to 1,000 books. If you're really serious about your education and you're reading the important books, right? If you are going to be reading not more than 500 to 1,000 books, you should really invest in that kind of library for yourself, ideally, right? But I assume that, inshallah, for your universities or whatever the case may be, you would have to use certain, libraries for resources, and that's completely fine. As I've said, use sticky notes for that, and a written journal, inshallah, okay? And then you just take the sticky, yes, exactly, sister. Once you've done that and you've gone through the book, just take those sticky notes out and either just staple them, and just put them inside your journal, or rewrite those notes in your own handwriting or from your memory, and so sort of test yourself and sort of consolidate that in your journal, in your notepad, right? Either way, you do that, inshallah, okay? طيب. Moving on, how to begin, and then she sort of just gives you that roadmap. Stick to one list at a time. Tips of how to do one thing at a time, do it well, do it deeply, and so on and so forth. Reading, so all of these are tips of how to actually begin your classical journey, how to actually educate, how to actually educate yourself, right? Then she's going to say to you when to read. So now she's just giving you tips of when to read. Okay, so let's say when to read, how to begin a journey, and when to read. Now she's giving you the routine, the discipline, time management, and so on and so forth. Okay. The first step: schedule regular reading and self-study time, and then you can, sort of as you guys were doing in your discussions, mashallah, certain things about doing things step by step. Start short, start small, make it consistent. And you guys mentioned that hadith, mashallah. All of that was very, very beneficial, mashallah. Okay, and some self-discipline, or just things to do with keep yourself disciplined when it comes to education. You don't get distracted. Guard your reading time. Don't get into social media, checking the emails the first thing in the morning. Take the first step now, action right now, and so on and so forth. Okay, so this is essentially the structure. Now we know that if we really want to engage with what this chapter is all about, we don't really need to do the first. We don't need to go to 1, 2, and 3, right? To really understand the crux of her argument. We need to go through chapter 4, 5, and 6 a bit more in a bit more detail, just so that we understand why is classical education, because this is where this portion, number 4, is where most of her arguments are. She's going to give you a picture of classical education via the trivium, the grammar stage, the logic stage, and the rhetoric stage. And you should be able to explain in your own words what that means, what each of those stages mean, okay? And then how to begin and when to read. And then you can go back. So, for example, let's just look at how to begin your classical journey. Let's go back over here. So when to read gives you a case study, okay? She gives you a case study and personal experience, how it is very easy to spend time watching soap operas or email spam and whatnot, as opposed to reading. So discipline is the key, right? So you can sort of dig into that. So you can now build substructures. How to begin your classical education journey? Guard your time, right? This is where the crux of it actually begins. Okay, so she's going to give you, oh, sorry, no, this is when to read, number 6, sorry. Number 6, you can go down and do this. The first step is to set a time for self-education. Set a time. Fix a time for it. Good. Which time is better? Morning is better than evening, and so on and so forth. Next is start short. Do you see what we're doing over here? Now we're building a substructure. Okay? Don't overdo it. Don't overdo it. Keep it balanced. Okay? Never check your email right before you start reading. Don't distract yourself. You see what I'm doing over here? I'm reading what she says, and after a bit of thought, I'm putting it all in my own words, right? Don't distract yourself with anything before reading. And this doesn't have to be exact. You could be writing, you could understand something slightly different from it. Like if I've said never check your email right before you start reading, you could say don't check your phone, because that phone, has WhatsApp and Telegram and Instagram and Facebook and email, of course. So you could just say that. But I would say don't distract yourself with anything. I would just keep it blank, right? Just nothing. Don't distract yourself with anything before reading. Okay. And that could be playing with your daughter, eating breakfast, none of that, right? Don't distract yourself with anything. It doesn't have to be just this, right? And guard your reading time, essentially, of course. So this simply feeds into this previous point. But let's say we just do that. Guard your reading time. Good. And start now. Take the first step now. We say start now. Keep it brief, keep it actionable. Now, when to read? This set us time, be regular, start small, don't overdo it, be consistent, but be reasonable with yourself. Don't distract yourself the first thing in the morning, guard your reading time, don't distract yourself, and then take action now. Pick up a book, start reading, and get to work, right? So that's a summary of when to read. So now what you can do is there anything within set a time that you find interesting that you can pick on? Right? Let's say it says, your first task in self-education is simple. Set a time for self-education, right? When she says, so now we're going a bit deeper now, okay? So now we've analyzed the structure, we know what her main points are. Let's pick her points apart now. Your first task in self-education is simple. Set a time for self-education. Your first task, what does she mean by that? Does she mean the first step in self-education is to simply set a time for self-education, just to make up a mind that this is the time that you're going to educate yourself in, to read in? One of the greatest ways to be critical is to put things on the Islamic paradigm, and if it's wrong, if there's some flaw in it, it will become clear. It will become apparent on the first instance. For example, here, your first task in self-education is simple. Set a time for self-education. What do we say to that as Muslims? Is that our first task in self-education? What do we do as Muslims as the first thing when we want to do something? Go on, Bismillah. Excellent. One sister says intention. Good. MashaAllah, well done. Make intention, set intention, same thing. Good. What else? Anything else? After you've set your intention right, we have to make sure it's not just the intention of education, it's intention for the right sake. It's for Allah's sake, right? Our purpose of educating ourselves is what? Is to grow close to Allah Azza wa Jal, isn't it? Right? We have to make sure if the intention that we are setting ourselves for this self-education, is that intention even correct? So our outlook on any kind of education, it is always centric, Islam centric. It's always Allah who is the ultimate goal with anything that we do, right? It's always setting the right intention for Allah Azza wa Jal. So our intention is that we want to self-educate ourselves. The first step would be to have the intention to do it for the sake of Allah, to get closer to Him, right? To seek His reward, to seek His pleasure, and so on and so forth. What's the second thing you do after you've set your intention right? Excellent, mashallah. The sister says, very good. She says, the author, she skips that totally because she's not a Muslim, right? That is not part of the liberal education paradigm. Exactly, because us as Muslims, everything starts with Allah Azza wa Jal, because we as Muslims say, we say, Allahumma inna na'udhu bika min ilmin la yanfa'. Right? We seek a refuge from ilm, from knowledge that is not beneficial, that does not benefit, right? So as we make this intention, we do istikhara basically. The second step would be to do istikhara before we even do anything. Before I pick up a book on logic, I need to make istikhara. Is this even good for me? Is there a purpose that I'm picking this book up for, that I'm going to serve my religion with? Is that something? So if I have this intention that I want to do it for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal and with this higher goal in mind, then I should be doing it for the higher goal, right? And then for that, my intention, if it's clear, then I need Allah's help. I need Allah to tell me and make things easy for me if it is good for me. If it is something that if I get into it, I might get misguided, then Allah will take me away from that. So truly, we leave our education in the hands of Allah Azza wa Jal. That is the first task. Intention and an istikhara, Allah's aid and Allah's counsel in what we do. And then and as we learn, the third step would then be, of course, to stay in accordance with the sunnah of the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now that we've done all of that, what do we do? The first task in self-education is still not setting a time for self-education. It is asking Allah for tawfiq. So you've done istikhara, you're going to do things according to the sunnah, but you have to ask Allah for tawfiq, the dua. Okay? Right? You still, subhanAllah, so much of our worldview, so much of our Islamic paradigm relies on dua, spirituality, tazkiyah. You guys with me, inshallah? So this is Islam. Islam gives us that tarbiyah. that is lacking in these liberal minds, because the liberal minds are really not free. They are shackled by the animalistic basal whims, this bestial whims, right? And one of the things that differentiates, inshallah, you can question this now that you've, mashallah, all of you have got to this point yourself by a simple question, right? What is the Islamic first step? You've come to this point, as the sister herself said, a part of the liberal education paradigm is none of it is, the tazkiyah of the nafs, the dua, the intention, none of that, right? You've come to a point yourself, inshallah, that Islam is different. Now, Islam is different. Islam focuses on the tarbiyah of the soul before it actually plunges you into the depths of self-education. But more importantly, it wants you to educate yourself in a way that benefits you, right? Under the guidance, right, of the Quran and the Sunnah, right? According to the guidance of the Sunnah. So for them, a liberal education, anyone is educated if they've read a few books of the great books and they have thought enough about the hard problems of the world, they are educated, even if no two people from that tradition agree with one another. They have no points of content, they have no points of agreement, right? In subhanAllah, in anything, so to speak, right? They always have disagreements. No great philosopher can become a great philosopher unless he disagrees with the previous great philosopher, right? It's a game of ego. It's a game of arrogance. It's a game of, humanistic, self-fulfillment. Okay, so Islam says no. Your thought, your thinking, your aql should remain within the limits of the Sharia, and Islam is supposed to guide that. So whenever you read something, or whatever you read, right, it would always be guided by the principle of Islam. So you can, subhanAllah, you can go into a lot more detail each of these things, right? So now we are going a bit more deeper now. Set a time, and when she set a time for self-education, she's saying morning is better than evening. There are portions of the day too when the mind, now you can sort of read within the structure, okay? There are portions of the day too when the mind should be eased, particularly after dinner. It should be applied to lighter occupations. Late evening is far from ideal for the project of reading seriously. It is usually far better to spend 45 minutes in reading before breakfast and before the children erupt from their bedrooms than to devote 2 hours to it in the evening. Okay? And then, as the autodidact Benjamin Franklin famously suggested, early to bed and early to rise is the most effective path to wisdom. The jury remains out on health and wealth. That's a phrase you can write down to memorize. It's a good phrase, a good metaphor. The health and wealth. Early to bed, early to rise, right? Is a recipe to live healthy, wealthy, and wise, something like that. I don't remember exactly, but you can, this is just something. These are phrases that you can sort of write down in your journals now. Start picking up journals and quotation that you can memorize for your own, eloquence and whatnot. Vocabulary. So early to bed, early to rise means when you go early to bed, you rise earlier, and when you do that, you remain healthy, you become wealthy, and you become wise. You become healthy because, of course, rising earlier would mean that you're rising according to your circadian rhythm. You're going to be using the morning hours, the morning light. You're going to have a good night's sleep, and so on and so forth. So the health is going to be attained by that. Then you're going to be wealthy because you are putting in the effort into earning money in the brightest, in the most distraction-free time. So you're focused and you can think outside the box to make money. And you're wise because that is the time when you have least distraction, so you can think about things, the hard problems of the world, and start solve them. That's the rationale behind this metaphor. Okay, early to bed, early to rise. Something makes you live healthy, wealthy, and wise. I don't remember exactly the second part, but that's the phrase by Benjamin Franklin. Okay. So what is she saying? She's proposing that mornings are better than evening, and she's giving you the reasons. What are the reasons that she's giving you? One evidence is a statement from Thomas Jefferson, and last I checked, Thomas Jefferson was not a prophet, right? Nor was Benjamin Franklin. So if we were to just leave that argument over there, that her two best forms of evidence are Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin, then So to say, Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin were no prophets. They were least from perfect, right? And horrible men at some in some forms as well, right? So why should we take their word? That could be a rebellious form of argumentation against her argument. Morning is better than evening. Why is morning better than evening? Right? In fact, science actually says that some people function better in night. You guys with me, inshallah? Some people function better in the evening than morning. However, if you now put back your Islamic cap on and you say, does this make sense according to Islam? What does Islam say about morning? You guys can answer this to yourself better, inshallah. What does Islam say about morning being better than evening? Does Islam have any answer to this? Does Islam have any opinion on this? Yes, the famous hadith, "Burika li ummati fi bukuriha." It has been blessed for my ummah in its earliest morning hours, right? So dawn hours. Burika li ummati. It has been blessed for my ummah. The barakah has been placed for my ummah. Fi bukuriha in its earliest time. You guys with me, inshallah? So whenever you are reading a portion and you've analyzed the wider structure of the book, and now you've subdivided the structures into substructures, and now you're digging deep into those structures, now you can start thinking critically. You know what I mean, inshallah? Morning is better than evening. What are her evidences? Evidence are aqwal, statements of two men who are not prophets, who have no dalil, who don't become any form of evidence in the Sharia as Muslims. So her evidence falls flat on its face. We don't accept it. However, what does Islam say about it? Well, Islam actually supports this. How? Burika li ummati fi bukuriha. Right? Burika li ummati fi bukuriha. Hadith mentions this. And then, of course, there's many other narrations that talk about the blessing that the Muslims have for the barakah. Right? Suhoor that you guys have for Ramadan. And when you fast, right, there's barakah in it. Why? Because it's, a pre-dawn meal, right? So morning has been placed, has barakah in it. So we can somewhat, as Muslims, accept this contention that morning is better than evening because it's according to al-Islam. طيب. Now, the next question would be, why? Right? And how? And is it true for all cases? These are the next follow-up question you can ask about this. Do we see how we are sort of breaking down everything? Right? We're questioning everything, and then from each thing that we break down, all of these questions are essentially coming from her structure. Her argument about when to read is to set a time, and she says to set a time, morning is better than evening. In that, she says, this is the evidence, well, because Thomas Jefferson says so, and well, because Benjamin Franklin says so. That's her entire structure for this contention, right? And once we know the structure of an argument, we can break it. We can say the first premise is a statement from someone who is speaking from experience, and subjective experience is not a conclusive inductive proof, let alone any objective proof, right? So you can reason based on that. Like one person's, just because you've not seen any black sheep doesn't mean it doesn't exist, right? It's observation. Your observation could be limited, just like science. Just because you've not seen the world to be round and you assume that the world is flat doesn't mean that 100 years after, now that later, the world is not going to be proven round. And indeed it was. Okay, so observations are limited. So you can sort of question. The more questions you can ask, the better, inshallah, you can reason. Are you guys with me, inshallah? Everyone with me? Is all of this making sense? Were you guys reading through like this? You see, mashallah, I've given you guys a week for one chapter, and the one chapter is only a few pages, right? So even if you just gave 1 hour, like subhanAllah, look at this. We've only been here for 2.5 hours. If you just spread this time over the week, right? Let's say 5 hours, 6 hours a week, 1 hour a day. You can. That's a lot more time than what we've just done. On day one, you could just do this much, for example. right? You could just do this much. Chapter 1, do this. On day 2, start digging into each of these. You see, these are 6 points. Each chapter is not going to be more than 5 to 6 points, right? So in the rest of the days, you could just, and as I said, not all portions or not all parts of this chapter are important. Her story is the least important. However, there are some points of benefit that you could dig into, such as her studying a complete graduate program, right, while being a full-time mother. And then the lessons you can take from it, as females, as sisters, that you can seek full-time knowledge. You can seek knowledge full-time. You can seek knowledge seriously, even after you have children, even after you have full-time responsibilities as parents, inshallah, okay? So lessons you can take. So inshallah, do this. Okay, do this. Whenever you start a book, as we mentioned, the title of the book, the author, the background check on the author, her intentions, her agenda, at the back of the book, the contents page, and so on and so forth. Get a good mental picture of the idea, then start answering the questions. Part 1, part 2, how many parts is the book? And how many chapters is that first part, and how many chapters is the second part? طيب. The first chapter, طيب. Can I turn the whole chapter into a question that chapter is answering? Right? Do that for all the chapters. And then look, where exactly is the author answering that? You see, when we actually went through the chapter and highlighted all of its main skeletal joints, main parts, we understood that she's actually answering the question, the actual question for this chapter. She's answering it in the last 3 points. So the first 3 points, as interesting as they are, they're not actually answering the question. So you can spend more time here than over here, although you could find some benefit in these initial stories, inshallah. Okay, so all of this was just to show you, inshallah, that this is how you should sort of prepare yourselves for each week for your seminars, inshallah. Okay, this is something that you should be doing by yourselves. And after a month, inshallah, when we meet each other, the next time will be the last week of Feb, and then we'll break for Ramadan. We will not have any seminars in Ramadan. We'll just have a break for Ramadan, inshallah, until after Eid. So when we have a seminar next time, inshallah, by that point, we'll have a summary and an analysis for the first 4 chapters. Okay, inshallah? So when we do that, I would expect all of you to have at least read the first 4 chapters with somewhat similar detail, right? And then I will pick up certain contentions that she's made, and we'll discuss them together in the class. We'll have your thoughts, and inshallah, we'll roughly follow the structures that I have given you in this sheet, these questions. You guys with me, inshallah? Hopefully you can see the screen, right? We'll just follow this structure roughly. I've given you these questions. So when we go through each of these sections, we'll have a limited time for it. But as I said, inshallah, because these are seminars, and this is how we're supposed to consolidate our education through discussions. You have to show up for these seminars, inshallah, first of all. Secondly, make yourself free for at least 3 hours. Because, subhanAllah, imagine it's already past midnight for me, and I've been speaking for the past 2.5 hours, right? So if we don't make the sacrifice, we're not going to be able to learn. We're not going to be able to learn, subhanAllah. Okay, so make sure that you guys make yourself available for these weekly seminars within amongst yourselves that you'll have with seminar leaders, inshallah. You can finish in an hour and a half, whatever the case may be, or within an hour. It doesn't have to be that detailed. You just have to discuss the structure things and the main key points, and then if she's correct or not, if she's actually delivering the case that she's meant to pursue in her chapter, whatever the case may be. You don't have to be so extensive in your discussion. You can simply get to the point, and the seminar leader can make you only talk about things which actually matter for that chapter, right? And then you can discuss your, as I said, through that structure, you can talk about your reflections and your action steps and so on and so forth. But this detail, right? This detail seminar, inshallah, this 2 to 3 hours will be once a month, but I request all of you, inshallah, to make time for that. Okay, make time for that. And we only have the next 2 weeks until the month of Feb, and then we'll break for Ramadan. Okay, inshallah. So just give yourself, give your best, and for the next 2 weeks, inshallah. Study hard, and yeah, just make sure you can reach out to us anytime. You can reach out to me anytime you want, inshallah. You can just email me. Yes, do expect the answers, the reply to be delayed by a few days, because I don't check my emails and my messages every day. And even if I do, I don't find the time to actually reply to, because the thing is, when you guys ask questions, especially those brothers and sisters who ask questions about their lives, it's a question which requires a religious verdict or a fatwa or something like that, and I have to be careful with it. So I take my time. I consult some ulama if I have to before I answer you guys. Okay, so just be patient with me when I take my time to answer your questions, inshallah. Okay. So let me just take your questions now quickly. Um, yes, alhamdulillah. So when you see things practically, it makes more sense, right? So this is why we had this introductory seminar, just so that you could see the action of reading in action. So do we decide between ourselves when we have the weekly seminars, or are there set days? So I would actually suggest that we stick to one day a week, like we just have Saturdays, the same time, 5 p.m. UK time, right? And everyone makes themselves available for that time, Saturday, 5 p.m., so that when my seminar happens after a month, right, we just do that, right? We have just the same time, ideally. However, because the seminars are conducted between yourselves, the sisters can sort of decide, but make sure whatever date you guys decide, you can have a discussion in the group, in the channel, inshallah. Whatever date you guys decide, whatever day you decide between yourselves, you stick to that every week, even if the seminar leader changes, right? Everyone sticks to that day, inshallah, and the same time, the same day. Yes, inshallah, you guys can do it on a Sunday evening as well. I don't mind. Just have a little discussion with this amongst yourselves in the discussion in the group, and see if all of you can sort of decide on one evening, inshallah. But for me personally, after a month, I would find it slightly difficult to do anything other than Saturday evening. I could do a Monday evening as well. I could do it. But we can perhaps just do a poll on that, inshallah, later. طيب. Is Monday okay with you guys for the monthly seminar? Let's just get it out of the way. Is Monday okay with you guys? Because Sunday, at that time, I'm actually teaching a class, so I won't be able to do Sunday evenings. This seminar that we've done today, inshallah, from sort of 5 p.m. In fact, I mean, we could do it earlier as well if it's a Monday, we could actually do it earlier. We could do it. Actually, it's a work day, so it would be difficult for you to do it earlier. That's fine. 5 p.m. is fine, inshallah. 5 p.m. is fine. That's fine. That's fine, inshallah. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. 5 p.m. That's fine, inshallah. We'll just stick to that. Yes. So the seminar leader, inshallah, we'll discuss that in the group later. Okay. So if there's any questions regarding the reading that we've done today, we'll just take some questions for the next 3-4 minutes, and then we'll just call it a day here, inshallah. The actual seminar leaders will be announced later, because I have to sort of first see if everyone is comfortable being a seminar leader. But it's possible then all of you would be comfortable. So just give it a couple days, inshallah. And let me do a poll if everyone is comfortable with being a seminar leader, or some people want to volunteer as seminar leaders. I personally believe that everyone should have a turn in being a seminar leader, because it will train you to be on your feet and be a teacher, sort of a teacher for others, and a leader, inshallah. Any questions with regards to how we did the reading today? Did it come to a point where you felt a bit tired towards the end of it? Because there's so much thinking involved. One of the sisters says not too much, probably because I was myself doing all the work. But yes. Oh, okay. Okay, طيب إن شاء الله. So inshallah, if there's no questions, you know what? I would just say that start getting yourself used to hard thinking, hard work, right? When you read books like Shuruhat, if I can find a book, oh, look at this. In fact, look at this. So this is my copy of Fath al-Majid, the Sharh of Kitab al-Tawheed, okay? By Sheikh Abdul Rahman al-Sheikh. And if you pick up any classical commentary, you'll notice how for each sentence there's a full page of commentary. And if you notice these classical commentaries, this is not really classical, it's modern slash, but it's not like quite antique, right? But if you pick up like commentaries on texts, right, you'll actually see how the master ulama, the scholars, they would think and read, right? You would see hawashi, marginal notes, essentially, shuruh, commentaries, right? And they would have you would find these marginal notes, right? Upon the books that they had, right? On notes on sides of the books, to the bottom, on the top, right? Things upon highlighting words and meanings, so lughawi pointers and so on and so forth, right? Extra things that they could so on and so forth. And then again, commentaries. You see, I've marked them in pencil because I know I can erase things if I've messed up, or I can go back at it with a bit more detail. Okay, so inshallah, when you get to that stage, you'll notice how the ulama, the commentaries they were writing on books, you'll see that this art of reading at the mastery of reading, the act of reading at play. You would see how masterful they were, subhanallah, with their reading, and so how deep they used to go in their readings, especially commentaries on books of lugha, grammar, and especially the tafsir of the Quran. When you look at books, when you look at commentaries of the Quran, you'll notice how the act of reading is at play. So one of the best ways of training yourself to be critical and be the most efficient reader is to train yourself in the languages and the sciences of the Quran and study the tafsir of the Quran. Because tafsir of the Quran essentially is a deep reading, is a form of deep reading, because it sort of, right? It's all, because it combines between everything that you can possibly imagine, right? All the sciences they can possibly imagine, everything, subhanAllah. So, inshallah, classical commentaries are a very good example of how ulama used to read. Would I recommend that you guys go through chapters 1 and 3 again and do this process you've shown us today? Definitely, inshallah. If you guys can find the time to do that, it will definitely help you. It will definitely benefit you, inshallah. Inshallah. Very good point. Doing it in Arabic must be another level. So when you're a student and you're studying these things, right? And say initially you're just starting out, for example, and say you're not quite used to speaking or writing Arabic, but you can say you've started the act of reading Arabic, and slowly you've become good at reading Arabic of a higher level, perhaps, let's say, right? When you're reading, right, and you want to make a note on it, that's something that popped up in your head, and you want to write something in English, force yourself to think, how can I say that in Arabic? And just write that in Arabic. Even if it's wrong, doesn't matter. Just write it in pencil and just write it down. Okay? And over time you'll see that, subhanAllah, you'd be writing Arabic. You'd be writing about a science, like a proper science in the Arabic language, in Islam, in the Arabic language. So when I was doing these commentaries, so of course all of this is in Arabic now, But when I first started, of course, I wasn't doing everything in Arabic, right? But very soon I would force myself to actually say, you know what, oh, I know how to say this in Arabic. Why can't I just make a note in Arabic on this? So I started to force myself to, even if it's one or two words that I knew I could utter in Arabic, I would write my notes in Arabic. And for example, when I was reading books of adab with the ulama, when they would give sharh of it, um, instead of writing the Urdu explanation of it, because initially we started studying in Urdu the adab of things, the Arabic language. Instead of writing his explanation in Urdu, I would force myself to think, is there an Arabic synonym to this word? I could possibly write this, right? Um, for example, right? And I would just write that down, right? So that just forces you to start writing in Arabic and communicating in Arabic. And very soon you realize that you're just taking notes in Arabic because it's just easier. Should we also try to write our ideas in Arabic for the English books we go through? If your Arabic is of that level, then there's no harm. There's no harm, inshallah. There's no harm. But it depends on if you can actually write Arabic to that level, that you can sort of you won't confuse yourself when you come back to the book with those notes, inshallah. Yes, any practice is good Arabic. Even if it's broken Arabic, it doesn't matter. It just has to be practice. However, when you're reading seriously and you want to take the most benefit out of it, if it's not just for fun, then stick to the language that you know so that you can communicate properly with the book. You can study the book deeply. So you're not wasting time just thinking about, oh, how do I say this in Arabic, right? Because then you'll lose the actual benefit of reading that book for the purpose that you're reading it. If you have time, half an hour a day of, just have a book like a fiction, for example, and just read that, and perhaps something nice comes to your mind. Just write that. Just start writing that in Arabic. Why not? Inshallah. Something's better than nothing. But serious literature, right? If you're not advanced in your Arabic, writing notes in Arabic, if you're not good with Arabic initially, like if you're not strong, and it will actually hamper your progress. It will slow you down, and it might even sort of uh, make it difficult for you to interact with the book deeply, because Arabic is not your first language at this point. So inshallah, over time, why not? Bismillah ta'ala. For example, I actually do that. Maybe it's not in this book, but in other books I have actually done that. In English books, I've actually written Arabic commentary in places, because it was just easier for me to communicate in that. And actually I mentioned in one of my classes that although English is my first language and Arabic is something we learned later, but because of this sheer routine that is highly invested in Arabic, because the Jamia, the teaching and everything all day long, and then reading, for research and for studies, and then for teaching, and so, subhanallah, I've sometimes found myself recently start to think to sort of, oh, how did I actually say that in English? It shouldn't happen, but that's a fact of life. The more you stay away from one language, the more you lose of it, right? So it can actually happen that you start becoming weak in your mother tongue, in your first language. Right? That's actually very possible, and that's what's been happening to me recently. I've increasingly started to find to think about, I know how to say that, but there's a phrase for it, we should say it all the time. What is it, right? So, and it comes to you, but it comes with a lag. So languages interfere. One supersedes, the more, with more usage and so on and so forth. But don't be worried about that. I hope when I'm explaining things, it's not, affecting my explanations and my teaching, inshallah. Although I do find that sometimes I can't express myself. Recently, I've been feeling that, as I used to when I was in England. because of not being able to use English all that much. SubhanAllah. But it's nothing to be worried about. Alhamdulillah. Because what I'm gaining, in against it is much more valuable. Alhamdulillah, the Arabic language. So everyone, Jazakumullah khairah. I hope everyone, benefited, everyone enjoyed themselves today. And I hope, inshallah, you employ these techniques and, you study in this manner, inshallah, okay? And lastly, as I said, we will end our sessions with a statement of gratitude. I would like to thank all of you for taking your precious time out and being here for almost 3 hours and staying patient and interacting and being, actually being active. And, may Allah bless all of you for your patience and for your efforts, and may Allah give you tawfiq, and may Allah allow us to purify our intentions for His sake and act according to His pleasure and according to the sunnah of His beloved Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and seek ilm for His sake alone, and seek the ilm that benefits us in this dunya and akhirah, in this dunya for the akhirah, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. And I apologize for the rescheduling that we had to do on Saturday. Okay, inshallah. So our next seminar would be the end of Feb. Bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, it will be a Monday, I believe, right? So Monday, same time, 5 p.m. UK time. I'll see you all there. Barakallahu feekum. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك اللهم تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم وصلى الله على النبي وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. بارك الله فيكم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.